Terran colony. I mean, it just sounds so much like it, right? Just add the grad on any end of any city or burg, right? And you're like, oh, it's a Terran thing. It's like humans. Anyways. Now, best of 5 in the top left for Kaizi Gaming. It is time. In the bottom right for Psystorm, still years later, we have GuMiho. Going for a proxy. GuMiho will probably win, I'm guessing. Maybe. GuMiho is playing pretty darn well. He was unfortunately knocked out by Dong Regu. Uh-oh, that's awkward. He was knocked out by Dong Regu. And in last qualifier, I'm not sure who he lost to in the first qualifier. But is this the third one? Yeah, it is, yeah. So I'm not sure about the first one, but the second one lost in a TvT, had a lot of mech, and that was awesome to watch, but it was not enough to defeat DRG, who was also playing rather well. Given it TvT, I really don't know how this is supposed to, well, like how it is going to go, but I feel like the way it's supposed to go is actually time favored. But more of an opinion thing. Like, I would not just put my life down on this. But I think time is the more favored, having been playing StarCraft for the last 7-ish years, and completely through all those years, where GuMiho, because the military, it sucks, but it happens, about 2 years. I think it's 20 months or something like that, has been away. So he's still kind of coming back into it, and just as far as mechanics go, GuMiho is always a little bit lacking in mechanics. Now, time isn't exactly perfect. I'm not going to put him up there with innovation at his peak, because time, I think, also has points where he's more about flash and style than he is about mechanics. Thinking about some of his 2-1-1 builds in this matchup in particular, and his a bit like it seems like he wants to be able to show off as much as Maru or Clem does, and sometimes he does, but then he lacks the substantial, the fundamentals that those two have. Is what seems to be Time's problem. So it does feel like kind of two people who aren't necessarily going to be the most mechanically sound, but who are going to have a lot of style to their play. And already we have a stylish TvT. GuMiho had to dodge out of an SCV to still proxy one barracks, but then decided, well, I'm going to go ahead and proxy the second one regardless of your scouting. It might backfire on him. Having two production facilities far apart from each other means that one Reaper could be pounced on, but actually the opposite happens, and Time loses a Reaper right off the bat. That was not at all supposed to happen. You know, I mean, at the end of the day, it's about the snowball effect, isn't it? But Time was supposed to have a bit of favoritism because his units were coming out from all the same place, but he's losing them regardless of that. GuMiho, I guess, the surprise second Rax. The one that Time never scouted. That is funny. Time, I think if he knew 100% that it was legitimately a 2-Rax, he would not have been so aggressive with his Reapers. But I think maybe there is that little misguess, mis-scouting, I don't know. But basically, he was like, oh, I'll just camp this one Rax. Hey, that's a lot of Reapers. Oh shit, that's too many Reapers, you know? I think it all kind of happened at once. Thank you, C and Wolf, for the 100 bits. Oh, bitty bits. I'm here to financially support cats. Well, they are the most important part of this. This whole channel falls apart as soon as I don't have cats. Also, thank you, Delicious Nick, for the viewer host. PVZ has made TvT look so much better lately. Not even gonna disagree. I've always liked TvT. Even when I'm a little cool on it, I've still liked it. You know, there were a couple of times where it felt like TvT for a few weeks was the same thing over and over again. But I've always still liked it more than PvZ, of the last 2 years anyways. PvZ has had its moments. PvZ has had its really fun, you know, Disruptors versus Lurkers, one of the first iterations of it back in the beginning of Legacy of the Void. Mass ground armies versus ground armies, Ling Baneling versus Disruptor Colossus, barely getting the force fields down, you know, some of those trap finals versus Cyril or Raynor, those were really fun. But, yeah, last 2 years, you just don't see as many of that. But, for me, TvT has always been a solid matchup. Even back in GOM TvT, where it really was happening way too often. In the bottom right of Blackburn now, we have Time. The bottom left, it is GuMiho. So funnily enough, I feel like that's last game was still, like, it ended very abruptly. It ended GuMiho sided. But I still think that was kind of a good game to fit my description of the players and how this best of 5 was going to go, which is that it's not going to be mechanically sound or about who can barely find someone else out of position and play the chess game that TvT can be. No, it was just about, you know, a little bit of cleverness. GuMiho goes for the proxy racks despite technically being scouted, and then says, I'm going to throw in another one. You're not going to expect that. And that could have backfired on him. He could have had his Reapers coming from 2 different places, which means that one side was caught before the other, and instead it was the opposite. Time was caught with too few Reapers, possibly because he just assumed, there's no way you're going to do this, no way. And he dies really abruptly, but it's not necessarily because of each other's mechanics that win went to GuMiho, right? Which, not to say anyone with good mechanics could have made that look better or worse. That was just one of those crazy, stupid games that happens in TvT. But Time, you know, he tried to respond with the 2 racks of his own, which really was a totally fair call. And he was trying to get to the rest of the game as well, thinking, okay, this surely is going to go into a macro game. Well, maybe his prediction of how the game was going to go was in the wrong. That's pretty much for sure. But what happens when we do have a more mechanical game, something more along the lines of a tank Raven push versus tank Raven push? I still would say that GuMiho is very good in those situations. I think he's a player who's going to be very comfortable with spellcasters and siege units. He plays a lot of mech, and he's been through a lot of those mass spellcaster days of old. But I think when it comes to Marine tank versus Marine tank, that's where I do give Time the edge. I think he'll win those games. But it is hard to say that we're going to get there to a point where I think Time is more comfortable than GuMiho. The more I'm thinking about how these two match up into TvT specifically, I do think it's still a lot about flash and style, but then I think GuMiho might be favored in the beginning, not just because of his history as a pro gamer, but because Time's recent history in TvT. I do doubt Time's TvT against a lot of other Terrans because of the way he controls his, his tank Raven, or oftentimes just doesn't even bother going for it. He goes for a 2-on-1 or something. We saw that in the season finals, where I was perhaps too critical in hindsight of the way that he was playing, but I was more bewildered than I think I was critical. Hopefully at least it came off that way. That he was playing the way he was. And he still ended up losing, so I was kind of validated, but he's playing very aggressive styles, very unorthodox TvTs. He kind of reminds me of Kelazur, or vice versa. Kelazur reminds me of Time. I think they both, when given 20 Marines, 4 tanks, and 4 medevacs, are better than a lot of players, but give me the early tech-based 1-1-1 TvT, and I doubt both of them and their ability to survive. So that's where I'm coming from. I really guess it just depends on how far the game goes. The farther the game goes, the more I favor Time, is how I'll just sum this all up. But GuMiho, not going to be letting the game get too far gone without doing some damage. It's already settled on a medevac drop / push. The tank is not going to try and blitz. It's just going to go for the good old-fashioned siege up in the natural. This is one of the worst maps to do this on, though. Oxide was extremely popular for this because the tank would hit the supply depot and the barracks and the reactor and all that good stuff. That's the most ideal situation for this push. You can see why Blackburn isn't really that great for it. Even if GuMiho wasn't forced back because of this Banshee, I don't think he does much damage. I'm kind of low-key judging GuMiho for doing this build on this map, but direct damage is one thing, indirect damage is another. I think more so this is about indirect damage, just kind of sieging up your opponent, forcing them to respond, getting the handle on the first portion of TvT. I think that's what GuMiho wanted, more than he thought this was going to do some seriously sick damage. Would never call this a contain, but it is, funnily enough, kind of drawing a line in the sand. Time is forced to keep tabs on this, which 2 Cyclones are totally prepared to do. But I am still surprised, even though this doesn't really seem scary, it's not a contain, I am surprised that Time goes for a 3rd on location. Fortunately, he does it so quickly and so confidently that even if it does force to be lifted off, it is going to survive. And with the way the map just plays out, it is one of the last attacking points of GuMiho. So in a way, it is really safe. It is, but I'm just still seems a little audacious. So GuMiho is continuing along just with this idea of drawing a line in the sand. Gonna finally move over to a more threatening position. He's got his medevac still available from earlier on. Now coming in a much bigger way with the auto turrets and potential elevator of the rest of the units. Time has been caught severely out of position. I think he was more so expecting the stalemate in the middle and less so was thinking about this drop into the main base. And he's struggling a little bit against it. Uh-oh, that tank didn't go down. Time loses his 1 tank that was in range. These 2 not in range. Which means these 2 tanks of GuMiho are going to be able to blast away on this reactor and starport. Although are going to be cleaned up by the Viking land. A low ground tank is helping to at least exchange a little bit better. Starport is going to be saved. Reactor as well. And at the end of the day, seconds before losing a couple of really key structures, Time has done a good job handling that. If he had lost the starport and reactor, that would have been a heavy blow to his production, but actually did okay. Traded out the army a little bit. Time does find himself behind in SCVs, but that's okay. He is ahead on combat shields. Excuse me. A little behind on production, though. A little behind on production. Just his 3rd barracks coming down a bit later because of all the chaos in his own main base. Both of them get a 3rd CC. GuMiho takes the triangle 3rd, which I really like if you're playing mech on this map. I think it's very dangerous in general, no matter what you're playing. It does put you closer to your opponent, so if you do make a mistake, if momentum is not on your side, you are going to be punished more so than Time would be punished if he had been the one to lose momentum. Liberator is not targeted down, meaning it's going to grab perhaps even both tanks. Nope, only grabs the 1. I was really concerned there, but GuMiho goes for the Viking trade out instead and is successful enough, perhaps. Maybe not enough. Maybe not. Oh, this is going to be a whole 3 tanks siege up, but that's going to be... Oh, so many Vikings on the ground still. An auto turret as well, and GuMiho... Oh, yeah, he's dead. He's so dead. He pulled his SCVs into one of the worst possible scenarios. Sometimes pulling an SCV... multiple SCVs, is a good call, even against Viking tank. But you really want to hopefully get on top of the tanks before they siege, and with a good number of army units on your side. In that case, GuMiho pulled them into 3 or 4 tank shots, so it felt like, onto an auto turret too, so they really did not get the best engagement whatsoever. They all just circle around an auto turret because the threat's so high. And Time delivers a fatal blow to GuMiho, I would say. Time is going to go for a 4th command center, again on location. Finds himself now up 14 workers. Remember, GuMiho could afford to lose a few workers and still be in an okay position economically, but he lost a lot. And he lost a lot of his army, too. I think abandoning ship as soon as he realized that Time was coming for a counter would have been the best move, because I think going to this other 3rd would not have been that bad at all. But that's a very strong statement coming from the person with the God vision, right? Like, of course, GuMiho, hoping he could just settle on his 3rd CC, hoping he would have enough to defend, chose the option of defending there. It was not good enough, yes, but you can see how maybe it would have worked, maybe. GuMiho still behind on the combat shields, so struggling to do anything with these Marines. Does find a cancel in the 4th command center, though, so that's best the Marines could have hoped for. 4th command center still on the way, though. Time very quick to replacing it. Got his massive static defense up in the main base. Got all his production. 2-2 is not that far ahead. GuMiho does not find himself totally, completely dead. Especially since he did grab that cancel there. But Time still definitely with the lead. Can afford to go for his armory upgrades as well. 6 tanks to 3. Time even still has one of his Ravens alive. It's a lot of things going well for Time. But with only a maybe 15 supply advantage, that's something that's absolutely recoverable in TvT if you play it very well, or if your opponent makes mistakes. Time is trying to reduce the severity of his mistakes by only using some Marines to gain that map control. So if you lose a handful of Marines, it does suck. Still a mistake if you just run 20 of them into a bunch of tanks. But it's not nearly as momentum swinging as if you brought your tanks as well and got pounced on. If you brought your, 4 tanks or all of your tanks, God forbid you get pounced on, you realize, oh no, I made a mistake. Tanks rarely ever survive that situation. Thus, you don't have a way of defending. Looks like Time might be feeling more confident about moving out, or at least more forward to protect his command center. Something that GuMiho is going to look to deny. Here we are in that positioning game that I was talking about, so I do still favor Time, not just because of the way the early and mid game went, because of his ability in this portion of TvT. Does get caught a little off guard, but he's got so many tanks, he might still be able to make this work. Auto turret's not coming down, actually. Interference matrix on the one tank of GuMiho on the front lines. The rest of the tanks behind are not going to be covered enough as Time takes, at the end of the day, a dominating engagement. Still keeps his Raven alive as well. And now he's up to a good 30 supply. All in army, too, so just needs to get it across the map. GuMiho has 2 tanks, actually it's a total of 4. He's using 2 tanks at a time. So with 4 tanks, he might be able to hold, but not all of them are siege, and Time is going to go for it. He's got more reinforcements coming here, and that's not going to be enough. 4 tanks with a Finnish planetary, all sieged up, ready to go. Maybe. It seems like that was an inevitability. He was not in the position of control. Someone in Sweden just posted a picture of their really good meatballs from a restaurant. And I just checked to see if it was close to the hotel I'm going to be staying at. It's like a 20-minute drive. Damn. Oh. Good stretch, good stretch. So tied up 1-1. Wasn't a big fan of GuMiho's opener with the medevac tank, but was a much bigger fan of his drop into the main. I thought it did okay. I thought it had a lot of potential, first of all. At the end of the day, it did okay. But then, obviously, the repercussions were found in his forward third CC. He could not quite get all those units on the front lines, quite enough units on the front lines to defend the third CC that was placed in that forward position that was very vulnerable. And Time's counter really knocked him on his butt. So I liked one portion of GuMiho's plan, not another. Ultimately, Time finds more damage done in revenge. And then I was fairly confident that Time was going to win his Marine tank battle. Because of his position, and because, again, I think Time might just be the better player at that point. Maybe. Hardwire is game 2. Game 3. I know how to count, don't worry about it. game 3. And GuMiho is going to go for a proxy hidden barracks, sorry. Because you can't really call it too much in proxy. Time's not going to be scouting at all. He's going for a factory expand. Ah, he's going to scout as well. He's going to scout an SCV scout. So this is the safest thing to do ever against a potential 2-Rax proxy, which I'm sure he's thinking GuMiho is very capable of doing. Even game 1 and game 3. Yeah, GuMiho could do it. He's not, though. GuMiho is going for his own factory expand. But he's going to freak Time out. Time's going to scout this and go, oh shit, and then make sure to get a second Reaper, make sure to stay kind of bundled up in his main. But eventually, no, actually, literally right now, okay, the timing kind of works out for Time Scout, never mind. He's going to figure out that it's not a 2-Rax. So seconds would have gone by where Time doesn't get hit by more than one Reaper or even a Reaper, because it's not proxied, right? So he's going to be looking at his watch, even if his SCV hadn't gotten this perfect timed scout, he's going to say, that's not proxied. But then his SCV literally sees the factory and goes, yeah, there's no way it's a 2-Rax. So there was maybe 1 second of an adrenaline rush for Time where he went, okay, mentally I have to prepare. And then it was gone pretty quickly. I'm even surprised he's going to commit to this bunker. But I guess the fear of a potential proxy barracks, regardless of its, you know, number 2 or 1, was still there. Yeah. He really doesn't need the bunker. Okay, he just immediately salvaged it. I guess cancel salvage kind of ends up in the same thing, but at the very least, finishing it gives you a chance to use it in case you needed it. Okay. GuMiho's more experienced. You're not incorrect, but it just seems so pointless, you know? Like, GuMiho has played this game for 11 years. Time has played it for 8. I'd call them both fairly experienced. And more importantly, Time, you could actually even argue that Time is more experienced right now because he's been more in the meta at a higher performance than GuMiho. Because GuMiho was in the military. He couldn't even perform. He was literally doing other things. He was learning how to shoot. So, I respect your defense of GuMiho, and I don't think that you're, like, entirely wrong or anything like that. I think GuMiho has a strong chance of winning this TvT, but it's just, I'm gonna have to disagree that the experience matters right now. Oh, Time gets a beautiful shot. That is the most ideal situation for the Wood of Mine. If it could have lived, I guess that would have been even better. But the Wood of Mine grabbing a Cyclone, that is perfect. GuMiho cannot do any damage. Trades out the Hellion, shows off his micro. It ain't too shabby. Not too shabby for this old man, but ultimately he lost that pressure. He loses a very important unit in the Cyclone that still has a little bit of time to be used very effectively. And I think it actually sucks more to lose a Cyclone when you're going to go for more Cyclones. An argument could be made for the opposite. An argument could be made that if you're going to have 2 Cyclones, a third dying doesn't take away the Cyclone's power of map control. Meh, I suppose, but simply to begin with, going for 3 Cyclones, a lot of production time on units that are quickly losing their value. In the next 2 minutes, I think Cyclones have pretty much lost all value, but GuMiho is just going to continue building Cyclones. And what's really odd about this is not even that he's making this many Cyclones, we have seen this occasionally in TvT, is that he's not bothering to get to the Magfield Accelerator, which if we do see 3+ Cyclones, we usually see the Cyclone upgrade. So that's a bit odd. One thing's for sure, for the next 2 minutes, GuMiho's going to have a lot of that map control. He's going to have 3 or 4 Cyclone lock-ons available, and assuming that they all don't get wasted on Marines. Yeah. GuMiho already won by forcing a bunker. That's experience. I mean, it's just an appropriate response by Time. GuMiho's played much more top-tier tournaments than Time. Just because someone plays in the GSL, I feel like that's actually been given too much credit, to be honest. Maybe I'm one of those biased European commentators that everyone on Reddit complains about. I never considered myself as such, because one thing I don't do is call Cyril the GOAT, and that has been a topic of conversation, to say the least. But, hey, maybe I have to admit it. But I really feel like people give the fact that someone is in GSL way too much credit. Like, if they're winning GSL, if they're in top 4 or top 8 GSL, okay, yeah, that is a lot. But I don't think that, you know, top 4 Europe is really that far behind. As far as the difficulty and acknowledgement of how good they are, right? Rainer, Cyril, Clem, all that. But people are like, well, GuMiho gets into the round of 24 in GSL, so automatically I think that just puts him in a better place, and it's like, calm down, calm down. Time is playing a lot of high-level StarCraft, a lot of international tournaments, like the season finals, which GuMiho has not been able to get to this entire year. Or last year, because, you know, he came back from the military, so. You really, really have to argue against your opinion, but everyone's got an opinion. So how is the game shaped up? We had a little bit of a lull. GuMiho went for all of these cyclones, so 4 cyclones in total. Yeah, 4 cyclones in total. Could have been, we usually 1 cyclone into tanks, so it could have been 3 more tanks and cyclones, and that would have been quite a lead. Ifs and buts, whatever, is not really too much of a point to talk about what he could have, should have had, but nonetheless, this is a decent push. Interference from GuMiho is very clever. He comes in from an angle that Time was not expecting a full committal from, with a Raven sneaking its way across the right side, goes to interference makes on the tanks, so Time knew would be vulnerable. Because I'm looking at this map right now, and I'm seeing that both of these players have recognized the difficulties of TvT on this map. So Time had to place, you know, his 4, now 5 tanks in very separate locations, ultimately. This is, yeah, absolutely a golden opportunity for Terrans to push in this way. But Time's emergency response of auto turret spam was good as well. So the Liberators are not really the point. They did siege up, they did survive, that's all great. They did help a little bit, but the 4 or 5 auto turrets that got slapped down, they actually buy a lot of time. They deal a lot of damage to Marines, especially if the Marines don't have combat shields, and they also take up all of the threats from the Marines. So they are focus fire down first. So very good response from Time. I think he was somewhat an acknowledgement that that could happen and was trying his best to make sure that it didn't just kill him. But it was a very difficult 30 seconds there, while he still had to defend both his third and his natural without knowing exactly where GuMiho is going to dedicate. That said, GuMiho might not have been able to find the easy peasy victory right then and there. He does still find a lead. 4th Command Center coming down on location for GuMiho as he's found a worker lead, I think, for the past couple of minutes. Does it turn into an economic lead? No, actually, there's a bit more of a spike there for Time. Liberators are doing their, I think, their initial job, which was to harass, but it doesn't work out too well. GuMiho still has a Raven, well used. This Liberator is just chilling. Chilling. Why not? Nothing's gonna go and attack it. Fourth Command Center is going to be placed on location not too far behind GuMiho's, so ultimately their economies are similar enough not to really worth mentioning over and over again. 2-2 is on the way for both players. Now, GuMiho does have a, what, 25-second lead there or something like that? And that is enough with them both maxing out right now. That is enough to potentially find a timing. Happens so rarely, though, because TvTs, when they're both maxed out, is so rarely going to be about one person pouncing. There's too many tanks to account for one engagement to usually end the game. But it can happen. So GuMiho has taken control of this mid-game where it's mass Marine tank, which means that Time doesn't even get to show off what I think he would be very good at. Although, you can see here when I'm talking about what he's good at, good control of the Marines, dominating that particular fight. But, so that the Time doesn't get to abuse that. He doesn't go on the other side of the map and get to put the pressure on GuMiho, which means that we might get into a mass starport late game. Before we do that, though, There's that upgrade timing. Fortunately, it's not going to affect time too much. Okay. But if we go into the mass Ravens, I am back once again to wondering who is the better player. It's possible that they're just so insanely even. I'm talking about very useless things. There is no better player. They're both just super even. Maybe, but I kind of want to give GuMiho back the credit of using, again, those spellcasters. So we'll see. We're not there yet. 2-2 is now done for time, so he chose the almost exact right timing. Very apt for his name, right? 3-3 is still very far ahead as time takes the engagement. Actually, he's going to lose it towards the very tail end as he was dealing with a medevac drop on top of his 2 defensive tanks here, I think is what happened. So he could have pulled back a couple of tanks, handful of Marines, and saved a bit of supply and actually won the fight officially, I guess, as far as trades go. He maybe could have been ahead 10-15 supply. Not really too important, but he did lose out on those forward armies. And now, most importantly, he has lost out on 3-3. He was doing the engagement, not starting 3-3. GuMiho gets a humongous lead in that fashion because now he's up by like 30 or 40 seconds. And GuMiho continues to take the map. 5th base is on the way. GuMiho is playing some very solid mechanical TvT. His transition over into starports is better. It's faster. It's happening in general. Time has actually not even been able to afford it quite yet. It looks like he wants to get maxed out again. And he's got to recognize that being the person on the defensive this entire TvT must mean that GuMiho has a chance to go into starports. He might be very well aware of the fact, but unable to do anything about it because he has to defend over and over again. Speaking of which, he has not defended this attack actually well enough. The Marines blitz in. Time's forced to lift his 3rd CC, and GuMiho has just been dominating this game since about minute 6 or 7, it feels like. Not totally, entirely, why haven't you left this game already time, but a little bit. Always applying the pressure to time, never letting time get to his side of the map. And I don't think that's where time feels very comfortable. I don't think he is ultimately the best turtle player. I know he does it a decent amount in TvZ, and it's like he wants to be known as a very good turtle late game player, but I actually don't think he's there yet. I still think he's going to find his best games when he can be very aggressive. It's not totally game over yet, but that was a big blow to Time's chances, because not only does he literally lose army and supply and economy, all things he really needs. The transition, the cut the head off transition for GuMiho is on the way. If Time was only ever facing Marine Tank over and over and over and over again, then there's a lot of chances for him to win if he just turtles correctly. But having to eventually face someone going into Raven, Viking, Liberator, any combination of those units, that is where Time is going to have a lot more difficulty. He does still have a very strong Viking count from early on. A lot of times you are going to have to play defensive in TvT, and you figure, okay, I can survive, but just barely. You're going to have to account for the future starport transition of your opponent. And you can kind of do that by adding in Vikings as opposed to medevacs throughout the mid-game, you know? So if Time was the aggressor, if he was the one in control, he's probably up to 8 medevacs, and he's been throwing bodies at GuMiho the entire time. But because he's been on the defensive, he actually built up a decent Viking count, so he's got a little bit of a jump start in that fashion. But GuMiho is going to potentially have more production than him. He's not quite sure what is going to be throwing his way. Just a couple of Ravens going for the interference matrix. Time's going to take this engagement with far less Marines. Surprised he stuck around for as long as he did, but he was hoping to take the engagement just straight up so his tanks could be uninterference matrix. Didn't actually happen. Again, losing the engagement on the left side. Vikings forced to land on top of very weak Marines. Sure, GuMiho might not be able to win again right here, right now, but this time he takes down 8 SCVs, 12 SCVs, and the command center. And Time is just losing out. Every single time that GuMiho pushes in, Time is not quite prepared. Scan reveals a very healthy GuMiho. Full saturation, extra base is coming down. Can only figure that he's got more bases on the outskirts. Time really needs an engagement to finally go his way. There was one engagement that went okay with him, and it's because GuMiho split his army, and it was over here. Because GuMiho only brought 30% of his army, and Time had 70% of his army. That was the last time things went well for Time. The only thing he's got going now is a slightly better tank upgrade, but he even gets dropped into the main. That's annoying. main goes over to a undefended third. Just give that up. It's dead. Yeah, can't even do anything about it. Time needs to max out on Viking, Raven, Marine, Tank, just like GuMiho, and hope that GuMiho makes a mistake. So far, GuMiho has not made the mistakes. It's Time always with just too few tanks to actually defend. Anti-armor missile could be big, and there it is. Something that GuMiho cannot respond with. The interference is also going down. Here come the Ravens of GuMiho, but only an auto turret gets thrown down, but it looks like numbers prevail in the end. Even with -3 armor on a lot of GuMiho's army, he is... I mean, I'd still say technically GuMiho won that engagement, right? He's still got his tanks sieged up. He's still rattling across the map, and GuMiho has had 3,000 minerals in the bank. He's already using it to remax a whole heck of a lot faster than Time. Time's thinking, okay, that's mostly a tank-based army. If I could just grab a couple of auto turrets, if I could just get to the Raven count, if I could just drop on top of them, then I could actually get a big victory, and that's exactly what he's going to do. Drop on top. Auto turrets do come down. This is so many tanks. Usually this would be an amazing trade. Usually it'd be like applause all around for Time. That was amazing. GuMiho really overstayed his welcome, and technically GuMiho did. But Time's still in a really bad spot. He's still really quite dead. GuMiho not just having a humongous bank, all of the map, all of the command centers. He also has 8 barracks to 5. So he is always remaxing a lot faster than Time ever possibly could. Now, to be fair, Time might not even really want to max out on Marines. But at this point, you just need bodies. You know, if you could magically conjure an army, it would be an army full of Raven, Viking, Tank. But he just needs bodies. He needs something to protect these tanks. I will give credit for Time to Time for one thing, and this has contributed to his lack of defenses elsewhere. He has always been very attentive to this base. This is his forward, newer base, and it has stayed alive this entire time because he was so attentive to it. He was always like, I can't move all of my tanks, or this is going to get broken as well. So that's why Time has always gotten broken elsewhere. It's because he always had tanks here. But finally, it seems like it's going to be broken. Big drop into the main base. Not humongous, but still enough to interrupt Time's production. GuMiho continuing to make more command centers. He's really not letting this lead slip. Time, this time around, he's going to defend his third. A little bit of Sim City to help out his tanks. But eventually enough Ravens could arrive, or just a good old-fashioned drop. There you have it. Time has to leave this 4th base ultimately undefended. Another victory for Time here. That's actually not too bad. Well, he did lose 3 tanks. So, it's still pretty bad. But he does save this base. He has hopes and dreams for this command center. He thinks it might actually get some mining done. Not so sure. Woo! Woo! He barely saves the planetary. Comes in for the kill. Auto turrets interference matrix abound, but GuMiho also had reinforcements show up, although it looks like perhaps too late to the party. Ooh, Time barely getting the victory there, but GuMiho just goes, okay, fair enough, over to the left side it is, which has been a weak point for Time this entire game. And you know what? I think some of it is the fact that it's a new map. It's a new map that splits armies really solidly. You know, it's not a map that is easy to go from one point to the other. And while it's not because it's a big map, it's not easy to defend one base than the other because there's so many chokes. And in TvT, chokes are a real killer, right? So if you let your opponent get into one choke, then you're already cut off from a base. Whereas on other maps, it'd be more of a concave opportunity, or hopefully you'd have a more like an alleyway yourself to use to get that type of surrounds, and a bit of a sandwich going. And this map kind of, it seems to split armies in a really harsh way. So if GuMiho had been under pressure like he is finally now, 20 minutes in and Time's finally on GuMiho's side of the map, then GuMiho probably would have had the same problems. But because GuMiho is taking control of this game from minute 6 or something like that, he's going to do it. And this is a beautiful surround that Time is just never, ever given. Time's not ready to give up yet, but he's got to play a perfect game. He can't even go for killing these command centers. He would have had to have gone for the throat. He needs to get on top of production. I love that Time is finding himself in a preferable position. This is where he feels like he can find some damage. He's finally on his opponent's side of the map. He's showing off his micro. And it's like, well, that's good for your morale there, Time. It's good for going into game 4. Because you're definitely not winning game 3. Awkward command center is awkward. Big old Doom drop into the main base. That is exactly what Time needs to do. Only a single missile turret to stop him, and that's not going to be enough. GuMiho is technically out of position, but Time has been rallying everything. So there's no defense for him back at home either. Time is 40 supply down in army. And he is miscontrolling the army that he desperately needs to save. No chance of defending. He would have needed 7 tanks and 20 marines on his main to actually defend this. He tries, and he is still trying to do this base race, but this is kind of awkward. Well, Planetary does fall for GuMiho. Thing is that Time really needed to abuse his army against a direct army of GuMiho, basically, right? He needed GuMiho to throw the 40 army supply advantage into a choke, trying to get up a ramp, or mishandled in the middle of the map or something like that, right? If he doesn't have that happen, GuMiho wins just by numbers. He has more numbers to spread around. He has more numbers to get concaves and jump on top of armies. So Time has already lost his win condition. GG. But that was his only shot, was going for a Doom drop into the main and then hoping that GuMiho severely mishandled it. So he did exactly the right thing. It was 7 minutes too late, but that was what he's supposed to do. Ah, Time made the wrong map accidentally. GG. Wow, poor Classic. He waits an hour and a half to play a best of 3 PvP, and he loses it. Cyan is facing Dream right now in the other qualifying match. We got the right map now. Pride of Altiris. Time really needs to get a better mid-game going. the bottom right, up 2-1. He is Psystorm's GuMiho. In the top left, we have the blue Terran Time for Kaizi Gaming. Never gets control over that map. GuMiho gets it from almost start to finish. Time had a pretty good start, actually, killing a Cyclone with a Widow Mine. And then GuMiho went for a bunch of Cyclones that I always have to wonder if it's truly effective, but Cyclones or no, Cyclones or tanks, whatever. GuMiho was able to push Time a lot more often. It did kind of start with the somewhat technically failed attempts at getting into the natural. He did not get into the natural, but it didn't fail as in it caused him anything. But I felt like it did kind of start there as far as who gained control over the momentum. Because even though GuMiho didn't get into the natural, he pretty much immediately backed away, in fact. He was, from then on, never not on Time's side of the map. Time was the one that had to strongly consider where to place his tanks to defend both bases, whereas GuMiho didn't ever seem to really have to consider where to place his tanks, because his tanks were never defensive. He was just, where's my next attack path? And I think if Time had the same opportunity, GuMiho would have had trouble defending his base. They took two different third bases, and maybe one is better than another. Time took the triangle base, GuMiho took the horizontal base, but it just didn't, we're not going to know until we see another version of TvT on that map, because GuMiho never got tested. So I really think that Time needs to get some better mid-game control. Maybe that starts with the early game. GuMiho goes for a 1-Rax expands. Doesn't bother walling off. Is he a little late to the supply depot? And Time goes for the factory expanse. Very large map. So I can see this being the map where Terrans do try to 1-Rax expand consistently in TvT. Even though factory expand's still the more, I guess, malleable. It has potential to be super aggressive, a little aggressive, or actually just also transition pretty quickly into a command center without being too far behind. 2 Reapers to the middle for GuMiho, 2 Reapers to the left for Time. The more awkward thing for Time is that he's not hitting the SCVs while they're building anything. But GuMiho is, so... Already not going well for Time. Already going super, super poorly, in fact. He does head into the main instead of wasting time in the natural, so okay, it's not too bad. He still is very far behind on this command center, though. I'm glad he gets an SCV down here, but it's going to get taken out, so... Fortunately, Time is going to not quite even up the SCV kill count, but at least he did get 5 SCVs. But Time is now way far behind on the orbital, way far behind. Much more important SCV kills for GuMiho there. GuMiho is just straight up playing the better TvT. That's what it feels like. Time, obviously, gamble. He gambled with the Reapers heading off to the left, because I think you intentionally have to do that, right? I think if you just click across the map to your opponent's natural, they do go through the middle. Maybe not if you go into the main, though. I wonder if that's the difference. If Time headed towards the main with the Reaper hop up, then that's... Actually, I think the Reapers do go to the left. So maybe it wasn't intentional. Maybe it was just awkward. Maybe Time didn't really give it a lot of consideration. That is unfortunate, then. But either way, just it really is, simply put, just he was out of position with the same number of units. You know, if he had been going into reactored Reapers, so he had 2 more on the way, then he probably is better off. Still a bit awkward, because his 2 Reapers probably aren't out, but it, yeah, didn't go that well. Down 7 SCVs, because GuMiho's been producing 2 at a time for a lot longer than Time has. This will be a tough one for Time to make his way out of. Victorious. He is up about 7 army supply. But with a bunker and a cyclone perfectly placed, GuMiho should not be taking any unnecessary damage. Time's gonna go for the bunker, and that seems to be... nope, not gonna die. Not gonna die. was gonna say maybe the bunker would be the only thing he gets. But he didn't even get that. Feels bad. Now a 9 worker deficit is truly terrible this early on. It is truly terrible. GuMiho has a CC, third CC, and done by the time Time starts his own. So that's going to be an even bigger economic lead for GuMiho. If Time had been 9 SCVs down at minute 7, I think it's very recoverable, but 9 SCVs down at minute 4 and 5. One thing for sure is that Time is not going to be getting control of the mid-game. He might seem like he's ready to do something because he has to. And he does still technically have the army supply lead right now. But assuming that this doesn't work, I don't think it will, then he has to play Super Turtle. And that did not work out for him in the last game, where he wasn't even behind last game. GuMiho is going to go up to 3 Ravens. He's got 1-1 on the way. Going to be adding on barracks, I'm guessing very soon. Does awkwardly find the army. GuMiho didn't realize it was all sieged up right there, and Time was kind of banking on that. Time also looking for maybe a bit of a surround opportunity or a cheeky pick with the Cyclones off to the right side. If GuMiho had been like, oh, army, let's move down to defend my third, the Cyclones could have grabbed the Ravens or the tanks as they came down. But GuMiho did see that with his own Cyclones, traded out 1 for 1 there. And now Time just kind of fully contains him in the natural, which doesn't last long. Oh, good use of the Interference Matrix. That is the best Interference Matrix that Time could have used to stop his tanks from being locked on to death. But it's a matter of time. 3 Ravens still alive for GuMiho, gathering energy, are gonna have plenty of auto turrets to throw down. Finally, some Vikings arrive, but ditto for GuMiho, so no advantage there for Time. He does use an auto turret, I think. That's why he won the Viking war. Grab it! Oh, I didn't grab it. The Cyclone gets a lock on too. Time is looking for very, very small victories. But as long as he can get those small victories and keep us contained, then he can still feel okay about this game. Perfectly timed unsiege. Perfectly timed disengage. Oh boy, that would have been so much worse if he lost all those tanks. He still needs to skedaddle, I think. Still needs to get the heck out of Dodge. GuMiho now gonna rightfully take his 3rd CC, which has been done for the last 2 minutes. Time is finishing his orbital, so he has managed to even up the 3rd base, I guess, situation a little bit. But he's still down 9 SCVs. Time is playing this disadvantageous game about as perfectly as possible. The unsiege is really what I'm still thinking about. Little Marine drop, hoping to catch an SCV transfer or misrallied units. Doesn't find anything, but he picks it up real quick. 2 Cyclones outside of the map. Usually don't kill too many SCVs, but 6 is already too much. Time can't afford anymore. And now they just run away from the Vikings. No drop potential. Time doesn't have any medevacs. He's trying to find GuMiho a little lacking on the western front of the defense, but he doesn't. Tried, but he doesn't. GuMiho was kind of paying attention, but then also Time trying to hit the natural too. Was just hoping desperately to find GuMiho severely out of position to find big victories. As it is, he's finding some victories. He did just kill 8 SCVs, again evening up the worker count back down to the 9 deficit. Magic number 9, I guess. But GuMiho has a couple other things, I guess, going for him, which is the 2-2 upgrades. They're already about 40% done. Times 1-1, 60% done. GuMiho also has faster combat shields, and now GuMiho is going through the middle of the map, and Time is not at all prepared to defend. 1 Raven alive for GuMiho will be enough. The Interference Matrix, both of these tanks, and with that, GuMiho might just win the game. GuMiho was actually a lot more dominating. Oh, hold on. Nope, not quite. Not quite gonna win the game. Not quite. And in fact, it's gonna get his army entirely cleaned up without dealing much economic damage, so time can breathe a little bit. But I'll say what I was gonna say. I feel like GuMiho has been more dominating in this TvT than I really give him credit for. Not completely dominating, like, you know, why is time even playing type, but he's been ahead so consistently. And it feels like time hasn't really had an opportunity. Game 2, there was opportunity, perhaps only because GuMiho was a little over-aggressive. He chose a build that I think needed to do something. And I didn't necessarily even like the build to begin with, and it didn't do enough. But since then, GuMiho has been in dominant form. Getting a siege up on these gases might not seem the most important thing, but the gases are important at this point. Well, not right now. Time's actually banking quite a lot, just in general. Hasn't had the second factory up. Isn't producing medifacts. He is just kind of derping a little bit right now. There he goes, back into producing some things, but he's just trying to get his tanks in position, trying to get his units in position without dying, which unfortunately is unsuccessful. He loses tanks, he loses refineries, loses marines. Time is only behind 20 army supply, but he is again the one on the defensive. That's not where he wants to be, and this drop looks golden for time. It's only because GuMiho was almost baiting it, and that is that. GuMiho with the last second baits, just to really say to time, I am the better player. I am. No, nothing wrong with GuMiho.